Welcome, everyone. My name is Dustin Robinson. I'll be your moderator for this panel today. It's going to be a really amazing and important panel. By way of background, I'm the founder of an investment fund called Eater Investments. We've invested in over a dozen psychedelic companies. I'm also the founder of a law firm that represents dozens of psychedelic companies. But above all, I'm Jewish. And as someone who is deeply passionate about psychedelics and also Jewish, today's topic is deeply personal to me. On October 7th, the world witnessed one of the most horrific attacks on a country. There were hundreds of fatalities, but like many wars, there's also tens of thousands of people, both Israelis and people across the world, that were left with a lot of trauma from those events. And joining me today are two panelists who are doing incredible work to address that trauma by using one of the most impactful medicines out there for PTSD, which is MDMA. Their initiative is called Healing October 7th, and I am deeply grateful for the work these two panelists are doing. So without further ado, I'm going to invite each of the panelists in, and I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves and explain how they got involved with MAPS Israel. So Keren, I'll hand it over to you first to give your introduction.
Hi. First, thank you for inviting us, Dustin. It's such an honor and a pleasure. So let's see, I'm a Sephardic Jew. I live in Israel. I'm first generation in Israel. My parents were born in Bulgaria. I'm the founder and the CEO of MAPS Israel. I'm also an educator, a senior educator for MAPS PBC, now Lycos, and a therapist and a supervisor in the MDMA assisted psychotherapy trial. What else? I'm a Hakomi trainer. I'm the founder of the Hakomi Institute of Israel, and I'm also a faculty in Haifa University. And most important, I'm a mother for two beautiful boys. So that's a little bit about me. Eyal, you want to introduce?
Yeah, thank you. Eyal, you want to go next? Give your introduction.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Dustin. So I'm Eyal Gura, I'm the father of Ella and Daniel. I'm an entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist in the last 15 years or so. Very recently, I founded one of the first digital health companies that came out of Israel, did AI for radiology and scored 10 FDA approvals. So I became familiar with that field. I'm also teaching entrepreneurship, and I'm on the board of Reichman University in Israel. And very recently, I'm the co-founder of the Healing October 7 initiative together with Keren and Dr. Adar.
Great. Well, thank you both for the work you guys are doing. And before we get into the specific initiative, I think it's important maybe for our viewers to know a little bit more background on MAPS Israel. I think a lot of people are very familiar with MAPS US. MAPS Israel is separate. It's a nonprofit. So maybe, Keren, you could give a little bit of background on just MAPS Israel and some of the other work you've done before you guys started this initiative.
Yeah, so MAPS Israel was founded maybe 3 years ago. Rick Dublin, who is a mentor and a friend, and I sat and thought, okay, we have to do more local research in Israel and in collaboration with Palestinians, and how can we do that? And we thought we would like to have more like a Israel-centered approach or Middle Eastern-centered approach in the region. And we decided together to open MAPS Israel, and we have two main intentions. One is studies. So we have many studies in hospitals in Israel, MDMA psychotherapy for eating disorder, MDMA for people that went through early abuse, early trauma, mostly sexual abuse. We have psychedelic for depression. All the things we're doing in studies are psychedelic assisted therapy. We do everything with therapy with a lot of intention for the preparation and integration. And another general intention of MAPS Israel is to bring education about psychedelics to this region. We have a beautiful conference, international conference, PsychMed Israel, coming in July. So education and research, that's what we do. And in October 7th, the work deepened and expanded.
Yeah. Well, now I want to dive into October 7th. So, so much of us across the world, we were watching those, events, and it was traumatic for me even watching. And the coming weeks were hard as well. And I have a lot of friends, I have family in Israel, and I was speaking with them. And, I think it would be helpful to just get an understanding of, where were you on October 7th, and how were like the coming weeks after October 7th? If you could, maybe both of you, maybe we could start with Eyal. Maybe if you could just share your personal experience on October 7th.
Yeah, so obviously a very traumatic day, both as a Jew and as Israeli. On a personal level, I woke up very early for the sounds of missiles and alarms. My kids were with their mother in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt for vacation, so I couldn't even reach them. It was kind of a scary several hours until we found the right person to go and tell them what is happening and to keep them secure and sane. When they were able to cross the border back safely to Eilat, I begged them to stay there for a couple of days because there were a lot of rumors that the Israeli desert is not safe, that there are spontaneous attacks in the desert, that everyone is attacking us. It was a very, very traumatic and a lot of uncertainty. It took a while for the Israeli forces to regroup and start to streamline the right information back to the citizens. But those hours were very tense. After those few days, they came back home to the neighborhood. I gave one of the apartments to a family that came from one of the kibbutzes that were attacked. So they moved few of the kibbutzes all together to where we live in Israel, which is in the central district. So many of us share their homes, and we had like dozens and dozens of families as refugees that came to stay in our kibbutz. And then together with the regrouping of our defense forces, there was an amazing experience of seeing how Israeli society group together, and people really helped each other. Everyone knows someone that was in the either in the kibbutzim or the special forces or the military. And people started to initiate amazing initiatives around food supply, mental health supply, housing supply, you name it. And so it really rejuvenated the nation in that sense after a very hard year that we suffered from a lot of internal issues. And you can really see the actual essence of Israel. It is still an amazing experience to be in a war zone under missiles, under constant attacks, but still experiencing this civil society.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's so important to point out, like, it was a horrific attack, but the silver lining here is that it's brought so many people together, even here in the US. So many different groups are coming together. Of course, there's also been some divide as well, but really so many Jewish people and non-Jewish people just coming together and trying to help and offering support. So I appreciate you sharing that. Keren, you want to give your personal experience on October 7th?
Wow, it was quite a day. I woke up with an alarm at 6:30 with my kids running to the shelter. And you hear the booms of the missiles. It was quite intense, and then we heard what's happening in the south, next to the Gaza border from the Israeli side. I have family, very close family in Kibbutz Sufa, which is right on the border. And I started talking with my cousins on the phone, and very early on, we realized there are Hamas terrorists in the kibbutz right next to their shelter, and they're hiding. And she said to me, I cannot speak. I can only write to you in WhatsApp. It was awful. It was awful. I'm in the middle of the country, in the center of the country. She's in the south with her family, who is very close to me, and hours, and it was really awful day for all of us. And the day after, They had to leave their home in the kibbutzes and to go to Eilat, which is in the south of Israel, and staying in a hotel for more than 2 months. And I actually went right after them, 2 days after. Me and the team of MAPS Israel and teams of Hakomi Institute and many other MAPS trained therapists, we all went to Eilat to start doing therapy, trauma-focused therapy with the survivors. It was a very profound, powerful experience to be in hell together with the survivors, and also to meet grace, deep strength and beauty and compassion in the middle of this really extreme situation they went through. And what a privilege for me to be able to be in a position of helping them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think that kind of brings us to my next question as far as, obviously it sounds like you were doing just by your reaction, you wanted to help, you knew there was going to be trauma, but then eventually you guys kind of formalized this into the Healing October 7th initiative. So can you talk to me a little bit about how, like, the thought process, how the group got together and decided to make this an actual initiative where you were going to try to, in a more organized fashion, heal some of the trauma going on from these events?
I can share some of those on my personal angle, and then Keren can add her own. So it was like a perfect storm in that sense. So I became only familiar with the field of psychedelics 2 years ago, and did a lot of personal research and scientific research. As an entrepreneur, I was fascinated by this field, and also as one that dived into the AI part and how we teach computers to think and algorithms and the equivalent in our human brain. It was fascinating to me, but beforehand, I didn't know anything about this thing. And just a couple of weeks before the war started, it was published on Nature magazine that the amazing work that Rick and the MAPS team did in the last 15 years accumulated to clinical trial phase 3 results that we will discuss later, but the science was already established. So when the war started, just connected the dots in my head, and me and Keren have been chatting for a while now about collaborating and work together, and we had this very meaningful call. We need to do something. Let's just make sure that this thing comes to Israel as soon as possible and in scale. So that was the initial thought process, and Keren was already in discussion with an amazing clinical champion, Dr. Adar, and we built the founding team together. And then each of us took one role. I was like on the external work and funding side. Dr. Adar and Keren were doing the clinical role. We had to recruit other team members. It was like starting a new startup. Luckily, we had a lot of ready-made building blocks with all the amazing work Keren did with MAPS Israel and the science that was proven by Rick and his team, and the awareness that is now in the world. So we didn't need to start from scratch. So we just started to build those things together. Then after we started to, like everyone else in Israel, to consume other people's goodwill and volunteering hours. So we had a whole high-tech company called Lives that donated their team to help us rebuild the website. And we had other nonprofits that help us and accountants that help us with building the budget, and a great company called Monday that started to build for us the flow and the digital flow of the treatment, so we will be ready. And Keren can elaborate. She approached all the PIs of the main hospitals in Israel to ask them to join this effort, and had an amazing success with aligning with them. And then we had to build a clinical protocol for the last 2 months with all the PIs, the head of the departments of the psychiatric departments in the hospitals. And in parallel to negotiate MD manufacturing, So we're doing all of this as a startup, and it's now accumulating to critical mass. And this is why we're so happy to discuss it today publicly for the first time.
Well, so I actually want to jump on something you mentioned. I think a lot of people don't realize, obviously, Keren mentioned she was doing therapy very soon after, but obviously MDMA is illegal if not being used for research purposes. So you guys are offering MDMA therapy through clinical trials, right? So maybe
Right.
Keren, you could kind of talk about how do you describe what Healing October 7th is? It's a clinical trial, and what are you guys looking to achieve? What does that clinical trial look like? If you could give a little bit more details around that.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was working with the teams in Eilat, it was very clear that there is an intergenerational Jewish trauma going on. It's not the first time the Jewish people experience something like that. We know it from stories of pogroms and wars and anti-Semitism. And it was very, very extreme to see the trauma. And also one of my family members was kidnapped. He's still in Gaza with the Hamas as an hostage. And I was thinking, how can we offer healing here? And our way is clinical trials. And I was a therapist and a supervisor and a trainer in the MDMA assisted therapy trial with the FDA approval. And I was thinking, how can we take that and offer it to so many more people? Because so many Jewish Israeli people are going to suffer now from trauma in so many circles. It's really all over Israel. And the question of how can we heal it came back again and again as I was there. And then we thought, okay, can we look now not only on MDMA with individuals, but also on MDMA for group, because the trauma is so collective. It's a collective trauma. It happened to people in the Nova Festival together, in the kibbutzes, moshavs, cities around the border together, soldiers together. So the idea of offering the healing together, so it's a collective trauma, we can offer collective healing. And also looking at the container of a group as a healing container. People can go through their own personal process, but in a group. So we wanted to do a clinical trial, and as Eyal said, we start thinking about which hospitals we would like to join and how can we submit it for approval. And we wrote the protocol. So Eyal mentioned Dr. Adar Avnon, who wrote the protocol with others, and creating a whole beautiful way of that we're going to check. It's still a study, right? It's still a research. We have to check the safety and the efficacy of the healing work in a group. But each of the people is going to get MDMA twice. We're going to have 3 preparatory sessions, individuals, one-on-one, and then all the beginning 6 people, and later on we hope to go to maybe 8 or 9 people in a group, 3 more meetings as a group. And then they're all going to experience MDMA therapy together, starting in the morning, staying in the night in the hospital in a beautiful room that we're now creating in each hospital that is very homey. And I don't use this word often, but I will use it now, sacred. We want to create a sacredness, not in the religious perspective, but in a sense of safe and welcome and homey feeling. And then after the MDMA, we're going to have 3 more integration sessions in a group and at least 1 individual, and then we'll do the same thing again. So that's the plan. And it's also, of course, have also economical thought. We would like to have this protocol as effective and cost effective as much as we can. So then if we offer the same, with the same therapist, with MDMA, the same time for 6 people, it's much more accessible.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that this idea of group therapy in a clinical trial is actually somewhat making you guys somewhat of a pioneer. Obviously, historically, psychedelics have been taken in groups. My investment fund, we invested in Beckley retreats in Jamaica. They do psilocybin in groups, and there is this kind of additional effect when you're doing it in a group. You feel like the group's energy and whatnot. But really, from a clinical trial perspective, there's been a lot of companies talking about the potential of group therapy, but there's been very little actual clinical trials around group therapy. So you guys really are, in many ways, kind of collecting very important research, not just with psychedelic assisted therapy, but this idea of group psychedelic assisted therapy. So I'd like if you could maybe talk a little bit, Keren, MAPS US, which is now the PBC, now called Lycos, they completed MDMA trial. They did not use group therapy, but they had tremendous results. So Keren, maybe you could talk a little bit about the MAPS PBC trial, the results of that trial, and how yours is different, being that you guys are going to be doing it in groups. And what are what do you believe the benefits will be from doing it in a group setting?
So first I would say that I will present the results, but I will say that the FDA did not approve it yet, not the safety, not the efficacy, so we have to remember that. And I would say that I feel very honored to be part of this study in the last maybe 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. Rick Dublin came and we sat and he said, we have to open it in Israel and to have sites in Israel too, and we did. We had 2 sites in Israel too, in Ber Yaakov and in Sheba Hospital. And the results, 86% of the phase 3 participants had a clinically meaningful improvement, which is very rare in the field of PTSD. 71% no longer met the PTSD criteria in the DSM-5, which is like the Bible of psychiatry, and 46.2 had remission from PTSD. So those are remarkable results. Again, we still need to go to get the FDA approval, but just this data is pretty unique, and I'm very optimistic about what we can learn from it for the future, specifically in the Middle East and in Israel. And in terms of what we hope to have in the group, we hope to have similar results. That would be amazing if we will see that, both of the safety. But we have a very high profile of safety in the Lycos studies, in the data. Again, the FDA need to approve that. We would like to keep those results and to see that we can offer pretty much, it's not the same protocol, of course, but a similar process, deep, safe, efficient process of the PTSD wounds, so the symptoms will go away. This is what we would like to check. And again, as I said before, because it's a collective trauma, I think there is meaning to that. We do the work in a collective way too. And we know that from the spiritual tradition the work came from originally, that lots of the work was done traditionally in groups and in the community. So there is a communal aspect here that I think is meaningful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible. And Eyal, maybe you could talk a little bit about one of the additional benefits from the group therapy is really from an economic perspective. If you're able to kind of put people in groups, more access, and that's kind of one of the big issues right now, that a lot of the people who are doubting the commercialization potential of psychedelics, that's one of the big issues, is access and the cost. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that as far as from like an economic perspective.
Yeah, sure. So this is where initially we felt that the entrepreneurial notion of Israel can come to place, because every year or so there is a different war zone somewhere in the world, and if you look on any medicine field or medical field, you'll see a mutual problem, which is the shortage of therapists, shortage of doctors, shortage of nurses. 2 billion people just joined middle class worldwide and cannot enjoy the same type of healthcare. So it's across the board, and especially in mental health. So even with all the new progress, and even with the coming potential FDA approval for psychedelics, even with that, we are talking about a protocol that requires a lot of labor, because in the US it will be 2 therapists on 1 patient, and we simply don't have enough therapists worldwide to deal with wars or getting countries out of PTSD altogether. So this is where this new protocol is coming to place, and we hope it will work. If it will work, it will be a gift from Israel to the world, to show that a nation can recover together from PTSD. I'm not sure it will help to prevent all future wars, because there are other agendas behind wars, but at least we can cut some of the trauma cycles that are causing kids to be traumatic and families to break up and businesses to shut down and communities to break. And some of those result in future traumas and future wars. So if we will be able to at least give this gift to the world, which is a protocol to heal nations right after wars within 15 weeks, it will be amazing. In terms of the economics, and beside the fact that we don't have enough therapists, also from a cost perspective, we wanted to get to a 4 or 5x factor in terms of the costs. So once you do the treatments in groups, and you put initially 6, but the protocol allows us to go up to 9 people per group once we feel it's safe enough. Once you get to this type of scale and you do it in several hospitals all together in multiple groups, you can get to like 4x and 5x efficiency factors comparing to the initial protocol, which is 2 therapists and 1 patient. So if you combine the time frame it takes today it takes sometimes years for a country or a nation to acknowledge that someone has a PTSD, and then they subscribe regular therapy and maybe medical cannabis for the rest of the life, and there are a lot of other expenditures that the economy suffers from, which are in the tens of thousands of dollars per year per patient for the rest of their lives. And over here, if you take into account what Keren just mentioned about the amazing results, within 15 weeks for the vast majority of the people, you can get this done and help them to start their life again and move on, and without this new cost for the government and the nation and the society. So there is the amazing efficiency on the cost side per patient and per therapy, but it's a lot of other great savings for the nation part and the economy side.
Yeah, and Eyal, you mentioned, that we could really, this is kind of like a proof of concept. If we could heal one nation, what you guys are doing is really just phase 1, and this could be scaled up, hopefully globally. So maybe Keren, if you could talk a little bit about, I know right now you guys are focused on kind of phase 1 of this, which is, healing some of the Israelis impacted, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the broader goals of what you hope to achieve with these trials.
Yeah, I would say that first, also in Healing October 7, we hope to have also survivors that are Arabs and Muslim that were in the south. And again, some of them were kidnapped and wounded by the Hamas. So it will be an honor if they will have access, and we are working on that, to Healing October 7 too. And then, it's such an incredible, complex place, the Middle East and Israel specifically, and there is so much suffering right now in this land, and so much violence all over. It's so extreme. So I hope, and I say it with also with lots of unknown about the future and about what we are going to discover, because it is a study. But I very much hope to discover that this work also can change consciousness in a deeper way and can help people, on one hand, know their inner experience and deepen into it, and discover the intergenerational trauma and the personal trauma that is connected to it, and maybe going through a process that will transfer those traumas, but also be in touch with the wider parts of who we are that are not only about our own personality and our own cultures, but expand a bit to us being humans, and how can we look at what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening all over the world, really, with politics and with conflicts and with polarization. How can we walk through those challenges and as humanity? And I think for me, it's for my personal experience, I think psychedelic has something to teach us, but that's something to be discovered in studies too. But I'm very hopeful about that. It actually gives me a lot of hope. Healing October 7 project, and just walking with the survivors, and also talking with Palestinians at this time. And I'm a strong believer in the human spirit, and I hope we can, as humanity, go through very difficult things and traumas and actually grow out of them and develop also because of the experiences. Yeah.
I want to talk more about that inner spirit, but first I want to just let the audience know, if you guys have any questions, you could drop them in the comments box. We're going to get to them at the end, or we're going to try to get to as many of them at the end. So any questions or comments, drop them in the comments box. But Keren, I think it would be helpful maybe if we talked a little bit about the actual science of MDMA and maybe give a little bit of background on what's really happening in the brain and why is it effective for PTSD, but also why do you believe that like MDMA potentially could really bring peace, right? There's something about MDMA, yeah, it helps with your own personal trauma, but it also helps you see the world and other individuals in a different way as well, which really is what you need in order to try to work your way towards peace. So if you could talk a little bit about the actual science of MDMA and why we believe it's effective for PTSD and helping people kind of come together and unify.
Well, I will talk a little bit about the science, but about the peace thing, it's a conclusion that is not totally 100% related to what we know. So about the science, what we know about the pharmacological profile of what's happening in the body when we take MDMA, we know that there is a lot of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, so all those materials that makes us feel much more safe and much more regulated. With PTSD, when a person goes through a very big life-threatening event, so the normal response is to try to fight it or to run away or to get frozen if the nervous system is recognized there is nothing I can do. I cannot run away and I cannot fight. So it's better to get frozen. It's not conscious, but it's a nervous system decision. It's better to get frozen so I won't feel what the difficulty of the event. And then what we see with PTSD patients that if most of the people that are going through a traumatic event, most of us are going back to the normal state. So the event is over and I'm going back to normal responses. With PTSD, the patient's system is not going back to normal. The event is ending, but I stay with the experience of things that are still life-threatening to me. So everything is very activated. And there is a very, I would say, essential experience of not being safe or not feeling safe, not feeling connected, and feeling isolated and helpless. So if you look at the MDMA and the experience it creates or may create of wellness and connection and empathy and love, it's almost like the exact opposite experience of having a PTSD experience. So it's like a mirror almost. So when a person is getting MDMA, and that's something we don't check in the study, we know the results before and after, but so that would be my assumptions or my opinions about things, okay? But what I think is happening is that the MDMA helps people feel safer and more connected and more present, so then they can process the trauma, they can process the memory, they can go through a psychological and sometimes a spiritual and definitely a physical process of transformation. And then the system is going back to a healthy state. So the MDMA, I think, is helping us feel regulated. So it's not too much for us to feel the event, the kidnap, the rape, the war, whatever it is. It usually is too much. It's too much of intense experience for a person to process. But with the MDMA, what I see with patients is that they're regulated enough so they can really hold and contain the process and go through it. And a funny story from a study, actually, it's an octopus study. Octopus is a very solitary animal. They rarely meet each other, and it's only for the how do you say it in English? Having sex. Thank you, mating. So they put MDMA in the water of octopuses, and then they came together and they start playing and be playful together. And so I think that's a hint. We don't have science that tell us, oh, MDMA will bring peace, but it's a hint of people that are usually very dysregulated because of the trauma, isolated, feeling unsafe. They're not into being in connection. The MDMA creates a sense of safety so they can meet difficult places inside of themselves and be in connection with the therapist. And the same with the octopus in a different way. So that's part of what brings me hope. And I think there is a lot to learn about that. And there is a study of Dr. Lior Rosman. He was in Imperial College, and He studied a group of Palestinians and Israeli that drank ayahuasca together. And now in MAPS, Rick Dublin and Natalie Ginsburg are also developing a similar study with MDMA. And the results are pretty interesting. They show us that people are going into their own trauma and into their own culture, but also beyond. So the identity of who I am as a Jew, as a Sephardic Jew, as a woman, as a mother is very relevant, but also my identity as a person, as a human being. So those are all interesting things to study.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's so interesting. What I want to talk about next is obviously you guys are running these clinical trials. You guys are a nonprofit. Things cost money. So Eyal, I don't know if maybe you could speak to kind of the budget to do what you guys are trying to do, and you know what the sort of use of those funds will be.
Sure. So I'll shortly recap in terms of the timelines and where we at. So we ramp up the team, the project. We worked intensively with the PIs at the hospital to build the clinical protocol. We had to do even interviews with shamans abroad to get the do's and don'ts for group therapy, which was an amazing experience and a lot of learning. And we needed to do all that in order to get Helsinki approval for the protocol, so that we can then get a regulatory approval to import the sort of speak drug. I'm saying sort of speak because there is a different definition of legality and science in terms of what is a drug or not, but we will not get into that. So we picked a very friendly and efficient Canadian company to work with us on the supply, that we will proudly expose soon. And then in terms of the next steps, so after ramping up the team, we are now starting the preparation for the trials themselves that will be done in several hospitals all at once. And we hope to start in the last 2 quarters of the year. So hopefully the very last part of the second quarter, but maybe middle of the year to start the first groups. And then we will do it very carefully initially with smaller groups and a lot of safety nets, but then we'll hopefully gradually increase the size of the groups and the numbers of the groups. And by then, we also need to be ready with the software that will manage all of that I mentioned, that a company called Monday is helping us to build. That will do all the surveys, the intakes, the feedbacks. It's much more complex to make sure that the whole group comes together to the same room with the same therapist, the rides, the potential stay-ins. There are a lot of logistics around that we need to be handled well. So we want to do it in a high-tech way, and have the proper data and dashboards afterward for both publications, but also economic efficiency proof. So for that, we need a lot of resources. So we initiated a fundraise of approximately $2.2 million. We were very lucky. A friend called Jessica Alter introduced us to Genevieve Jerviston from the PSFC forum. It's Psychedelic Science Future Collaborative in the US, and this group was amazing and helped us. They really saw the potential of this sizable clinical trial to promote the entire field as a whole, not only the Israeli part of it. And so we are very grateful to get their support. So we raised quickly 2/3 of the entire amount in the last month or so, even though there were holidays and stuff. So we are very confident that we will be able to complete this fundraise soon. And if people in the audience know of anyone that is interested in the field of psychedelics or in supporting PTSD, it would be great to get referrals to potential donors. We will publish or already publish the link for donation in the comments here. And so we're very grateful for all those donations and referrals. And as I mentioned earlier, we want this to become a gift from Israel to the world. So once this will be proven as scientifically working well, we want other nations to be able to do the same thing for large communities who experience post-trauma as a group.
That's great, and we're gonna share in the link. We'll provide a link with the where you could donate. I know I'm trying to do everything I can to help. I don't think you guys will have a problem raising this money, but I think it is important. Anyone who feels touched by this really should try to support it. If you don't have money, reach out to Keren, reach out to Eyal, see how you could get involved. Otherwise, we have the website flashing right now at the bottom of the screen if you wanted to donate. This is such an important cause. I'm actually helping Keren and MAPS Israel. We're throwing a fundraiser in Miami on March 1st. And so if you're interested, if you live in Miami or you're coming to Miami, we'd love to have you. We're doing a Shabbat dinner. Rick Doblin will be there in Miami. And the whole goal is to raise money for the Healing October 7th initiative. So I know that MAPS Israel has other fundraisers and things that they're doing. And I think they'll be extremely successful. I think they're going to exceed their goal because I think there's such a huge need for the work that you guys are doing. And I think so many people are touched by what's going on in the Middle East, but also people who are just passionate about psychedelic medicines and the potential to really heal people and help people see eye to eye and hopefully even work our way towards peace. So I really appreciate that. We're going to see if there's any questions. We're going to jump into questions in just a minute. But before we go into questions, Eyal, Keren, any closing remarks on your end? Anything that we didn't cover that you guys wanted to mention?
Not from my end.
No.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we actually don't have too many questions. If anyone has a question, now would be the time. But I think, all the information, this was super informative. I see we have a comment, not a question, but appreciate your comment, Mark. Really appreciate the work you guys are doing. And my investment fund, psychedelicinvest.com, all the different organizations I'm involved with, we're going to do everything we can to support you guys. And I encourage the audience and everyone else in the community to do what they can as well. So I think we do not have any questions. So we're going to end it here. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate the time and thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.